Hello, everyone. Welcome to a winter edition of Plugged In from YAA Electric. Thank you for being here today. Justice, how you feeling?
I'm doing well. Doing well. How about
Good.
you?
Doing well. Today we're going to be talking all about how you can prepare your EV for winter, or simply if you're wondering how is EV performance affected by cold temperatures. We're going to dive into it today. If you've got questions, drop them in the chat. We're going to try to get into every aspect of EV performance in cold temperatures and in snow. There's a lot to talk about. It's kind of surprising how much there is to talk about when it comes to this topic, but it's something I've experienced firsthand. It's been getting down into the 20s and even into the teens here where I live in Appalachia. I don't mind it. I like the cold, but I have noticed some drops in my estimated range in my Hyundai Ioniq 5. And that's really no surprise because I'm an EV nerd, but I want to make sure and share what to expect with everyone out there. Justice, over in California, do you experience any winter EV driving?
Oh, of course. Of course. It got to almost 40 degrees here yesterday. Certainly every winter I have to put my sunshade up, unfold it, get it in the window, then, put the visors down. Oh, it's a pain to get it ready for winter.
Well, we appreciate your sarcasm, but those of us who live in the cold north will have a lot to relate to. And Justice, you can brag as we go. Now, I see a relevant question early on in the chat. Thank you everyone for being here today live. Does this apply to hybrids? Less so. The battery performance stuff that we're going to talk about does apply. However, hybrids have a combustion engine to fall back on. So you're not going to be stressing about it with a hybrid, but you would have the same drop in battery performance efficiency in a hybrid. But we got to keep in mind, internal combustion powered vehicles also have efficiency losses in the winter. What's the big difference? You got to plan out your charging a whole lot more carefully than you have to plan out where to fill up for gas. So we I don't want to overlook that. I understand it's different, but both do have efficiency losses in cold temperatures, but for different reasons, right, Justice?
Yeah. Yeah. You handle them differently. I should
Yeah.
say that.
Yep. All right, let's dive in. So, first of all, what have I experienced? Typically, my Ioniq 5 was showing me an estimated range at full 100% battery capacity of about 250 to 260 miles on a charge. When the weather has dropped below 50 degrees recently, and especially when it gets below 35 degrees Fahrenheit over here in the United States, we use the Fahrenheit system. Sorry, world. I've noticed that my estimated range at 100% full is about 200 miles on a charge. Now, that's about what I expected. I would have been shocked if it was 150, 180, something like that. But I have yet to drive my Ioniq 5 in the teens or the single digits. It gets below zero maybe once or twice a year here where I live. But I have yet to drive my car in those situations. We'll see how it goes. But let's talk about overall what you should expect. There's plenty of data about this because, Justice, any guesses as to what the number one country in the world for EV adoption is by percentage of new vehicle market share?
It's Sweden or Norway. Let me go with Sweden.
Norway. Sweden's
Norway.
pretty
Okay.
close. Sweden's pretty close, but yeah. And Norway, they've got something like, I'm not lying here, like 80% of new vehicles sold are electric or plug-in hybrids. It's a massive percentage of market share. Norway's a pretty cold country, and they've got plenty of data about how EV performance is affected by cold weather out of Norway. And we've also got plenty of data we're going to be talking about from Recurrent Auto. We had Recurrent Auto's CEO on this show about 3 or 4 months ago, and we had a great talk with him about how they are looking to turn battery performance in EVs into data that can be accessed by future used EV shoppers to see how the health of the battery has been, how it's been treated, and how that might affect your purchasing decisions when you're looking at a used EV years in the future. So, without getting too much into Recurrent Auto's awesome product lineup that they've got going on, we are going to be talking about their data, and I'll make sure to drop a link to that here in a bit. In Norway, a study of a bunch of different EV models in 2019 found that on average, in 32-degree weather, range drops by about 20%. Now, some models, it's more like 10%. Some models, it's more like 35%. So it really depends on the battery chemistry of the EV that you're looking at. It also, of course, depends on just how cold the temperatures are. If you're looking at 0 degrees Fahrenheit, you're going to have even more range losses. If you're looking at a headwind in the cold, you're going to be looking at more range losses. But for this standardized study that they did in Norway, in winter, they expect about 20% range loss. Recurrent Auto's data found that depending on the model, it's between 10 and 30% range loss. So it looks like we have a pretty good understanding now of exactly how much range is lost when it's about 30 degrees Fahrenheit outside. Now, Justice, let's talk chemistry real quick because EVs, they don't produce a lot of heat or hardly any at all as a waste byproduct, right? Internal combustion powered vehicles, they produce a whole lot of heat as a waste byproduct. In fact, only about 30 to 40% of the energy that goes into an internal combustion engine actually gets used to power the motion of the vehicle. A whole lot of it is lost as heat. Now, this is typically one of the bragging points for EVs, right? EVs are a whole lot more efficient, but this is one of the, or if not the, maybe it's the only downside of the massive efficiency that EVs have is they don't produce that heat waste. And therefore, EVs have to create their own heat to heat the cabin in the wintertime.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys in California, you probably don't even think about this, do you?
No, I had to have my heater up to like 67
Ah,
yesterday.
nice.
Had to warm me up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I bet. What about the sun? Is the sun still shining out there in California?
Yeah, actually, I had to close the blinds. It was blinding me over here. We had 24 inches of sunshine this morning. So,
You're so silly, Justice. Well, over here in the north, the cold north, whenever we've got to heat the cabin in the morning, there's two different strategies that engineers have used to heat EVs. Okay. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn to Recurrent Auto for their excellent explainer of how this is done. And I think everyone's going to really appreciate this great explainer that they did. Go ahead and share my screen because I couldn't say it any better than they did. Now, y'all be sure to check out Recurrent Auto. Not sponsored or anything like that, but they're awesome with what they're doing in the EV space. Here's where things get fun. So we're going to go ahead and take a look at this right here. I'm going to quote from them. Earlier EVs and some modern ones like the Rivian, they rely on resistive heating. This means heating coils draw additional electricity from the battery with the sole purpose of heating cabin air. This costs a lot of energy. Other EVs, especially largely new ones, use a heat pump to transfer heat from the motors to the cabin. Transferring existing heat in the vehicle costs a whole lot less energy than generating new heat, even when idling. But supplementary heat may still be needed. So, depending on the car, the size of its cabin, and other factors, a heater may average between 1 kilowatt and 5 kilowatts of electrical draw. And more energy is needed to get the cabin warmed up in the beginning. To keep it warm, a lot less energy is needed. Now, modern EVs like my own Ionic 5, there's a feature where I can look at the live electrical draw and see what sources are drawing power. And I have seen that it's typically between 1 and 2 kilowatt draw for the heater if it's on like 75 or 80 to try to hurry up and get the cabin warmed up. But once I lower it down to like 70, 72, I mean, it's a marginal effect. But there you go. Depends on which EV you have to determine exactly how your EV is getting heated. Heat pumps are kind of the craze nowadays, aren't they, for efficiency purposes?
yeah, I mean that makes sense. Because you really can't lose all that range in your battery just because it's cold and then add the heat loss on top of that. I mean, it makes sense to be more efficient with that. And I wonder what we're working on next there.
Yeah, and I know Tesla is pretty deep into this. I don't know the details, but do you know anything about Tesla's innovations in this space?
I don't. I haven't looked too far into that, but as they are selling in so many really cold countries, I know this has to be a main focus on that. I'm sure Giga Berlin has got some things up their sleeve to address this.
Yeah. Something I found interesting is that none other than General Motors and their partnership with oh crap, who is it? LG Energy Solutions. Yes, that's who it is. The new Ultium electric platform actually has some new heat pump innovations built into it that are supposed to recapture a whole lot more heat than previous versions of EV heat pumps have been able to. So that's exciting. We're just now starting to get some of these GM Ultium powered EVs on the road. So there's not a whole lot we know from real world testing yet, but there will be pretty soon. Right now, it's just the GMC Hummer EV and a few hundred Cadillac Lyrics on the road. See, is there anything else that's on the road today that is Ultium powered? I don't think so, Justice.
I don't think so. No, I think those are just the only two. Lots coming, but nothing
Yeah.
on the road yet.
What's coming in 2023 from GM?
Let's see.
Equinox EV,
Yeah, the Equinox, the
the Blazer, and there's the
oh, is that
Silverado.
coming? The Silverado. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
the one I was trying to think of. I'm like, I know there's a truck,
So they're all slated
Silverado.
for a
Yeah,
late 2023 arrival. Um, which who knows, that could be pushed back. I hope not. But yeah, they should have even better heat recovery, which would increase efficiency in cold weather. But now, there's plenty of other things to talk about when it comes to EV performance in the winter. And we are going to talk about preparing your EV for winter. But I think from everything we've already talked about in the first 5 minutes, it's pretty clear that one way to prepare for EV ownership in the winter or cold weather in general is to be prepared to plan your charging stops. Um, put a little bit more effort into that. When you charge at home, it doesn't matter. I mean, 90% of EV charging is done at home, but if you're taking a road trip across the Midwest in the cold winter time, you may need to, or you definitely need to think about where you're going to charge. Give a little bit extra leeway when it comes to you planning your charging stops. You don't want to plan to pull in with 5% state of charge if there's a real chance that you might be using way more energy than your car's battery management system predicts. But yeah, let's dive into charging speeds, shall we?
yeah. I'm curious how much those change in the cold weather.
Now, I did not pull up a specific percentage as to how much charging speeds are reduced, but they are reduced. Now, Justice, while I go into this explainer, do you want to see if you can find any kind of study on charging speeds in the
Yeah,
winter? Okay. Thank you for that. So we got live research on the air. So charging is slower in general, but it's not like a deal breaker. Okay. It's not like you're going to go from 20-minute charge times like I have in the Ionic 5 or you might have in the Kia EV6 or in a Tesla. It's not like you're going from 20-minute charge times to 1 hour charge times. It's going to be like a 20-minute charge time to a 35-minute charge time. I have experienced that firsthand in 30-degree weather. Um, now, why? Why are there such massive differences in how EVs are going to be able to charge in the winter? A lot of it comes down to whether or not that specific model, and in some cases, that specific trim has battery preconditioning. My Ionic 5, it's a 2022 model. It does not. And I would say it's the only thing I don't like about my car. I don't have battery preconditioning. I can't click a button on my touch screen and digital button and pull up to a charging station with the battery ready to accept full power like a Tesla can. I mean, Justice, explain to us how that works. How does battery preconditioning work in a Tesla? What happens whenever you put like a supercharger into the navigation system? What does the car do?
yeah. So the card will go into automatic preconditioning once you put it in there and say you're on your way. You have to say
Hmm.
you're on your way, and that just gets the battery ready to accept that kind of charge right away. So it flattens your charging curve, and you're ready to go for those high speeds right away
Yeah, that's
once you get
something
there.
that I don't have. And I know that every Ionic 5 built today for the 2023 model year, it does have battery preconditioning. There are two things that got a lot of pushback with the 2022 Ionic 5 when it made its debut. It was that, and also the lack of a rear window windshield wiper. But they're not adding that. They just said put up with it. So, an Ionic 5 specific issue in the winter is a bunch of crud getting on the rear window, but I can live with that, I guess. Did you find
Do
any
you
studies?
do you get? I did.
Oh.
Real fast. Do you get a lot of snow on the back window? Like when
No, it's
is it
slush.
sticking there? Okay.
No, slush that gets kicked up from the road. That's more of
Oh,
an issue.
all right. So I did find the Idaho National Laboratory study found that at 32 degrees Fahrenheit, an EV battery took 36% less energy when charging versus that same time at 77 degrees. So 36% less at the same amount of time.
That's a pretty significant
Yeah,
difference.
that's a significant difference.
Yeah, I guess that this is also where it comes down to the capabilities of your EV, because if you think about 36%, whenever you've got an EV that typically charges in about 20-25 minutes in 70-degree weather, a 36% difference isn't going to be the end of the world. It might still be 30-35 minutes, but it's not like it's going to be a full hour. Whereas if you have a Toyota BZ4X all-wheel drive, that's going to take about an hour to charge. This is a 2023 model. Take an hour to charge on a good day, and then you're dealing with cold weather charging losses. It might take you an hour and 20 minutes. And I don't know. That starts to matter a whole lot more, at least in my book, but we'll leave that up to the Toyota guys, right?
Yeah, that certainly would matter to me. I mean, that would be on a Toyota or in something like that, slow charging like that, that would be a deal breaker for me. On a Tesla, okay, whatever, it's just going to be a couple more minutes, but it's still frustrating if you're losing range, therefore you're stopping a lot more often. So even if it's 10 more minutes, but you have to make two more stops, that's a lot of extra time put on to your trip.
Yeah, I agree. And this comes back to something that you and I say often on the show. And I think it's one thing that makes us kind of unique in the EV YouTube space, which is we don't think EVs are for everyone yet. If you live in a very cold region, you travel via interstate often, especially if you live in an area without significant charging infrastructure like North Dakota, Montana, Nebraska. I may not recommend an EV to that car buyer because it's just not there yet when it comes to the technology combined with the charging infrastructure. But for most regions, it's still going to be doable, right?
Yeah, I mean, obviously in California, even in the cold parts, and yes, we do have cold, snowy parts in California. Um, it's not as much because the infrastructure's here. It's not as big of a deal as those big, long cross country states.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about the northeastern tier of the country right now, from like the DC area all the way up towards Boston. It gets pretty cold up there, but you got chargers just everywhere. So that's the kind of difference where it really depends on what your use case is going to be and where you live. But briefly, why is charging slower? Why is EV performance kind of worse in the winter to begin with? It's a lot about chemistry. Okay. So every chemical reaction, including the transfer of electricity in a battery's pack, it's going to operate optimally under a certain temperature range. Back when I was getting my degree in biology, I remember going to the chemistry lab and having to study this firsthand. And then we would use something called a catalyst that you would add to the chemical reaction, and notice how it happens quicker when it's warmed up by the catalyst. Or you could even put it on a heating plate. Just talking about chemistry labs here on this show today, but if you put the chemical reaction on a heating plate and increase that temperature by, I don't know, 10-20 degrees, that reaction is going to happen a whole lot quicker. Well, conversely, when it's really cold outside, those reactions are going to happen much slower. Now, lithium ion batteries typically operate optimally between about 55 and 75 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's great for most of the year, but when it's cold outside, It's not that great. In summer, there are some performance losses with an EV, but they are not nearly as noticeable or significant as what is caused by cold weather. So driving an EV in 100-degree Fahrenheit weather, it's not the biggest deal, but driving an EV in 20-degree Fahrenheit weather is a much bigger deal. Do you agree with that statement? Since you got a lot more hot
Yeah.
weather in California than I do.
Yeah. I mean, it's routinely about 115 degrees here in Sacramento, and yeah, when I drove in that, there wasn't there was a drop in performance, but barely negligible. Not more than I would see in an ICE vehicle with my AC cranked up.
Ah, yes, that is true. One other thing that I want to bring up that does negatively affect EV performance in the winter is the possibility of using winter tires. Winter tires are built for traction, not for efficiency. I got myself some Michelin Cross Climate 2s. They were not cheap, but so far they've been worth it. For my Ionic 5, I'm going to go ahead and pull up a picture just because the tread is so interesting. Um, this tire is snow rated. However, it's technically an all season tire. So that is what makes it unique. Despite that, and despite the innovation in the rubber technology that's supposed to make this have better performance even in warmer temperatures, I've noticed a decline in efficiency because, it's not an efficiency tire. It was shipped with Michelin Primacy tires, and those are much more efficient than what you're going to get in any winter type tire. So just keep in mind, if you live in a snowy place and you've got to put some kind of snow tires on your car in the winter months, that is also going to hit your efficiency a bit. It's not going to be a 30% drop or anything, but it might be 5% decrease in efficiency, maybe even slightly more than that. But it is something to keep in mind. I know over there on, I forget what the mountain pass is called, Justice, but between California and Reno, Nevada, there's a
Yeah, the
big
Sierra
old,
Nevada, the Donner Pass, that's right above me.
yeah, well, that area, that's like
Yeah.
in the winter, they require snow tires and sometimes they require chains.
Yeah, we require change most of the winter months. Actually, you can't get over Donner Pass without them.
Yeah, see, I've never even been to a place where chains are required. So that
Oh,
sounds
yeah.
sounds like an adventure. Where do you get
That's
chains
a
at? You just go to the store and buy them?
You can go to the store and buy them. If you have forgotten, they sell them at the side of the road for 300% higher than you could buy them at the auto parts store. But usually, if I go skiing and I'm going to go over Donner Pass, I'll go to the auto parts store, get them, go skiing, come back, return them. It's a free rental.
Cool. I like your strategy, gaming the system. Phil's got a good point here. I do have an all-wheel drive Ioniq 5. However, how do I put this? Your winter driving performance is only as good as your tires. Um, Even in an EV, the electric all-wheel drive system is much more quickly responsive than you'll get with an all-wheel drive system in a combustion-powered vehicle. Electricity travels a whole lot faster than gears spinning. However, if I were to try to drive in the snow with my Michelin Primacy tires that came with the car, even though I have all-wheel drive, it's not the biggest difference in the world. It really comes down to the tires, especially because most EVs, if not all EVs, are shipped with OEM tires that are made especially for maximizing range to try to get you that EPA rated range figure, right? They don't want to let down their consumers. So, you're going from the most efficient tires to like the least efficient tires by switching to a winter tire. And that's kind of what I've experienced firsthand. But yeah, an episode about tires would be very interesting,
Yeah.
Stuart. I think that is worth doing, so I'll take note of that. Thank you for that. So, Justice, we're continuing to dive through this winter episode. What's on your mind so far? We got a few more things to talk about, but I want to know, what are you thinking?
So I mean, this is all news to me. I've never driven in the snow in an EV. Even when I had my Model 3, I didn't go up over the pass. Didn't do any of that. So personally is very interested in that. Like for home charging, how much is the difference in a level 2 home charger?
You mean in
I
the
would be
winter?
curious. Yeah, in the winter. Like for
Well,
you, if you're charging it, oh, you would have a level 1, right?
I have a level 1 and I charge it in
Yes.
my driveway, not a garage, so I don't know the answer. I'll need to figure that out, but if you keep it in a garage, I guess it's gonna be alright.
Yeah, in the garage, I would think. But I mean, your garage isn't conditioned,
No.
right? So I guess it just depends. Because I'm thinking like up where Phil is, where it's like 1 degree.
Yeah.
What even in a garage, okay, so now it's 5 degrees. Like that's got to still hurt on your home charging. So I'd be curious to know how much longer it would take to charge at home
Mhm.
in those kind of temperatures.
Yeah, I agree. That's very interesting to think about. When I'm charging mine outside in the cold, I mean, it has been like 15 degrees on a few nights here already this fall. Um, Charging did seem to be a bit slower, meaning that whenever I got in my car in the morning to take my kid to school, the percentage state of charge that I was at, I remember thinking it was a bit lower than I thought it would be. So I wonder what kind of charging losses there are, inefficiencies that there are due to the cold. Because I'm not quite sure if charging inefficiencies would be the same thing as just slower charging. Um, yeah, I don't know. We'd have to have a battery expert on the show. But pretty interesting. Now, I want to talk about something that's a little bit funny. Okay. Now, I'm not just picking on Tesla because my own car has door handles like this. But EV skeptics out there, I bet somebody in the chat has brought up frozen door handles. I haven't been keeping up with the chat
No,
comments today, but
nobody's brought that up yet that I've seen. But I know the number one part to break on a Model S is the presenting door handles.
ah, yes. Fancy
So
door handles.
yeah,
Why do they have fancy door handles, Justice? It's not just for looks, it's for
efficiency. Yeah, it's for
yeah.
drag coefficient.
Yeah, reducing that drag coefficient so you can get more miles on a charge. That's why we've got these fancy door handles. My Ionic 5 has similar handles to what you see here with the Tesla. If you live in an area where you get plenty of freezing rain, or even if it snows and your car gets covered in snow, it thaws and then it refreezes, you can get frozen door handles. That's annoying, but there's an easy fix for that. And you don't even have to go out and buy anything. You can make your own car safe de-icer by mixing 2 parts rubbing alcohol with 1 part water, putting it into a spray bottle, and spraying it right onto the door handles. That will take care of it. I've done that myself. It's important that you dilute the rubbing alcohol so you do not risk damaging the paint on the vehicle. Okay. So make sure and dilute it. 2 parts alcohol, 1 part water. But that's an easy fix. Still, it can be annoying, but that's not really EV specific. Any door handle can get frozen.
Yeah, yeah. I've been, I am originally from Boston, and frozen door handles have always been a thing there, long before EVs.
Yeah,
And
that is true.
trying to get your key into the lock on a door. Anyone remembers those cars that old? We had to have put a key in to unlock it. That was a huge thing in the winter too.
That is true. One thing I've noticed is that when my windshield wipers are frozen with some light snow that we had about a month ago, we had some light snow in October here. Um, it's quicker to get those thawed out because the heater in the EV is just so much quicker. Even though it's having to use more energy directly from the battery pack to produce that heat, it's not just sucking it off of waste heat from the internal combustion engine. The heat is very quickly produced, and defogging the window, heating up that windshield is so much quicker in the EV. And I've noticed even an effect on how quickly I can just wipe the windshield. So that's pretty cool. But let's wrap up the show by talking about what you can do to prepare for the wintertime in an EV. Now, these first tips are applicable to anyone, not just with an EV. Anyone who drives in the winter, you want to, of course, keep a warm blanket or two in the car, an emergency kit that at least contains a flashlight, some water. Hopefully, you can keep it from freezing. Non-perishable food like trail mix, and then a first aid kit. Right? Everyone wants to have that, not just EV drivers. But what about EV specific planning that you can do? If you're going to travel on, cross country interstate travel in the winter where it's cold, plan your charging stops accordingly. You need to be more generous with how many miles you plan to stop, or how much range you plan to stop with at your next charging stop. For example, if you typically try to pull into a charging station, whether it's a Tesla Supercharger, Electrify America, or others at like 5% state of charge, you don't want to plan to do that in the winter. You're going to want to maybe bump that up to 15, 20% state of charge. Um, you want to make sure that you're not going to run out of charge on a winter road trip, because that's just asking for trouble. Let's see, what else can you do to prepare your EV for winter? Simply keep in mind that just because you have electric all-wheel drive, if you do, it doesn't mean you're invincible in the snow. Okay, tires still matter a lot, and in fact, EVs are very heavy. And if you don't have good tires, you could go sliding right across a patch of ice if you don't have good traction, because EVs have such a low center of gravity and they're so heavy. So that is something else to keep in mind. And whenever you are taking those charging stops, expect to be there for about 30 to 40% longer. Um, with that in mind, with all of the above in mind, if you're thinking about buying an electric vehicle and you live in a cold place, go for the trim option or the model with a larger battery pack. Perfect example is the 2023 US built Volkswagen ID4. You now have a new 62 kilowatt hour battery option. That's the smaller battery pack. It's more affordable, but it gets just 208 miles of range on a good day. If I lived in the north, I would not want to opt for that battery pack. I would instead shell out an extra $4,000 to go for a 82 kilowatt hour battery pack. Same thing for a Tesla. Like if there's ever the option of buying a Model Y with a smaller battery pack capacity, if you live in the north, I would go for the larger battery pack. It's worth the money. Trust me, if you're driving in the winter. I would avoid EVs like the Nissan Leaf if I lived in Michigan, Illinois, upper Midwest, even maybe Massachusetts, things like that. Unless you literally don't do interstate travel. If you just drive it around town, it's fine. But Justice, do you have any thoughts to share with everyone about winter driving, or anything that you've that might have come to mind in today's show?
Well, if I had a Mach-E, I'd have to take all that shrimp out of my frunk to fit all those emergency supplies into it.
Oh my
So,
gosh. Hopefully
so,
everyone
but
who's watching knows what we're referencing.
but yeah, I mean, so your emergency kit advice is always good. I mean, don't forget flares and those types of things in your emergency kits. Everybody needs to get that. That I never thought of keeping extra food in the vehicle, but that's a good winter idea. There's
For emergencies.
nothing I would have thought of, but it's a great idea because I do know, even here, like say over the Donner Pass, I do know people who've been stuck there for 3 days because they got snowed in on the
Wow.
highway, and nobody could get them out. So that happens about every 5 years. You get people stuck for multiple days on the pass there. So
Wow, that's
and
pretty
yeah,
scary. And
tire pressure is a big deal
yeah, so
all the time.
James Malone in the chat, thank you so much for bringing up tire pressure in the winter, because as I was preparing my notes for today's show, I knew there was something that slipped my mind. I thought about it a few days ago, slipped my mind today. That is it. Tire pressure in the winter. Remember, whenever it gets cold outside, your tire pressure is going to drop. So you need to make sure that you have properly inflated tires. I know for optimal range, you want to have more air in the tires, right? But in the winter, you want to make sure it's not overinflated so that you're not going to be basically losing traction. And then when it warms up a few months later, if you forget to let air out of your tires and you've got them right up against the max PSI, that would be bad for your tires, because that hot air is going to expand in the summer and you're going to have overinflated tires. That's bad for wear. It's also kind of dangerous. Um, so, yeah, thank you for bringing that up. You want to make sure your tire pressure is right. And then this is a good point, too. James coming in with the hot ones today. Heat pump. If you're shopping for an EV and you live in a cold place, you're going to want to highly consider choosing an electric model that does include a heat pump for better winter efficiency. Excellent point. So that's why we've got the community with us. They're helping us out. Hopefully, we're helping them too.
Yeah, Yeah, I mean, this is great. I am personally learning a lot about this issue, and while I do not plan to be anywhere freezing, yep. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Phil's got
Well,
the
I mean,
official
yeah,
advice for us. Thank you,
yeah.
Phil. Thank you. Um,
Isn't that always the case though? Shouldn't you always keep your tires properly inflated,
Yeah, but Phil
no
had a
matter
good
what?
point. Rather than just guesstimating or trying to play around with the tire pressure for safety, always keep the tires inflated at the cold pressure that's on the plate in the door. If you look down there at the bottom of the inside of the door, you'll see exactly how your tires should be inflated. Thank you for that, Phil. But Justice,
Does
not
the does that change with uh, your tires? If you change your tires out, does that number still stay the same?
hmm. Well, I guess it's built for the spec OEM tires, so I don't
I
know.
w- yeah, I mean that's a legitimate question. I do not know the answer to. I know you should be going by the car, not by the number on the tire, because car weights and balance are different. But if you change out the tires, is that number supposed to change?
I don't know. Maybe Phil will let us know in the chat. We'll see. Need to have a tire expert on the show.
Any
Maybe it's
yeah,
Phil. Maybe
any
it's
tire
Phil.
experts?
Yeah, so we hope you guys learned a thing or two about owning an EV in the winter and what to expect and how to shop for an EV if you live in a cold place. Um, Winter is just around the corner, starts in a few weeks. So I will be sharing more with you guys about exactly what my own ownership experiences are like. It'll be interesting to see what kind of range I get next time I take a road trip. I'll be heading up to DC to hang out with the YAA family. I'll be driving there. So I want to know, what kind of range am I going to get? It'll depend on what the weather is like a week from now, but we'll see. Be
It's about
exciting.
it's going to be about the same as it is in Raleigh
Oh,
in
okay.
a week. I've been following because
Yeah, yeah.
I'm scared to go to the snow.
Oh, it'll be all right. I'll give you a lift if you need it, Justice.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. We'll be back on Thursday. So it's a Tuesday and Thursday show now. And let us know what you're wondering about. Feel free to join us at the YAA Community Forum. We've got a great electric vehicle forum with thousands and thousands of members and about 500 posts already, which is quite a lot. Before we go, I want to remind everyone that we've got 1 day left of 20% off of YAA Plus membership. And you've also got $100 off of extended warranties. So this is a limited time offer that ends on the 30th of November. And we hope to see you there. So love to have you as part of the community. You can unlock so many more resources with the YAA Plus membership. It's amazing. It's definitely a value deal. But Justice, I hope you have a wonderful day.
You as well. Bye, everybody.
Bye bye.